So today we're gonna unpack the N-word, you guys. This is a lot. So let's buckle in for it. All right. So of course, the most used form of this word is in blank 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 a. That of course we all know it derived from in blank 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 er. However, that's not the origin of that word. In order to find out where that word truly came from, we need to go all the way back to Africa, because that's where the origin of the word is. Ingar, Ngr, which meant of God, godly, embodiment of God, the strength of God, the wisdom of God, knowledge of God, of God. So back when the Pharaoh let the people out of Egypt, they went on the mass exodus and continued about their lives. So different tribes broke out, dispersed through Africa, and they made their lives. Well, when colonizers came around, they went to these tribes. Ingar was entrusted to protect these tribes. Ingar was always in the form of generally a giant male who was strong enough to help build, create, hunt, gather, that whole thing. Ingar was the embodiment of what each tribe needed to depend on surviving. So, with that, the tribe leaders would always tell the colonizers when they came, no, we're not going to tell you our people, you need to leave. Well, colonizers back then had weapons. So the first thing they would do was draw weapons and say, all right, well, you're going by force. And Ingar, which was the first noble act in the slave trade for Ingar, which was to sacrifice himself. By this, Ingar would get on the boat under the assumption that he made a deal with the colonizers that they would take him and leave his tribe. Obviously, we know that's not true, because later that day, all the other slaves would be on the boat anyways. So then let's fast forward across the horrible boat ride where many slaves, potential slaves, were just in distress. They died of starvation, famine, and all these other things, as well as they jumped off the boat because they figured they'd rather drown than deal with this, which I can't blame them. We get here, the people that made it, they were sold. They were bought by slave owners and taken to plantations. Ingar was always pointed out when he was brought onto the box. When it was time for him to step up on the soapbox, he was sold as the highest bidding currency for the day. And they always made sure to tell them that this is Ingar of this tribe. Because the reason of telling them this was Ingar of this tribe was so that way the slave owners knew that this was a powerful man. This is one that you need to break. You need to change this person to make them a slave. So with that in mind, they of course got sold for the highest amount of money because they could do the heaviest amount of work in the fields. Also, the slave owners had taken great pleasure in what they were about to do. When they got them back to their plantations, they would strap Ingar, who already has not been fed or had proper water for weeks on the boat ride over, would strap them up to a whipping post, beat them, deprive them of more water, would not let the other slaves give them water or sustenance as well. Then they would be sexually dehumanized in obviously the worst ways possible, beaten, and just left there. And then finally, when they would submit and agree to be slaves, they would throw them out in the field. And what they would tell the other slaves is, that's your Ingar. I broke him. I'm your master. That's your Ingar. But obviously they didn't use Ingar because they knew what it meant. And they weren't going to call him that. But I'm not going to use the word that they called them. And so that's where the origin of the N-word came from, because they added a few extra letters to make Ingar not of God. Because why would you want to call your property God? So that's where the logic of that brought that word into existence. And over time, we've liked to just slap the definition of the N-word with an ignorant person, dark, that whole matter. So that's where that word came from. And then people like to believe they can flip a word, change it, do whatever have you with that word. You can't. That is just a disgusting word. And of course, you can't make people stop using it. However, if you want to use that word, at least know where it comes from. Know the true meaning, not just the Google quick search of that word. Know the origin of it, because that's where you will find the hurt that is truly attached to that word. And personally, I wouldn't want to use that. Well, make good choices or don't.